I'll just give you a very brief outline of some of the things that we've been doing at the University of Alberta and sort of help sort of the idea of what's happening in terms of nanomaterial testing and some of those regulatory hurdles, and give you an outline of sort of what's coming up, and this is especially important for SMEs who may not have an idea of really what it takes to go through those regulatory issues. So I work at the University of Alberta. The university has sponsored the Office of Environmental Nanosafety, and this is part of a very large initiative, which I'll explain in a minute, funded by NRC, NSERC, and Environment Canada. So I work directly with them to try and come up with good science-based regulations for nanomaterials and develop new tests and guidelines. And we'll be finishing that project in about a year and a half, but we have some very important things to say about that. So as everybody pretty well knows, there's lots of investments around the world, but there's a lot of challenges that places on the regulatory agencies. I don't think you realize how stressed they are about nanomaterials. They don't really know how to do assessments for particles, because particles are a lot different than solutes, and I'll explain how that, or what that really means. How can a company, so many companies, I work with a large number of companies, they want to have good policies of environmental stewardship, so they really want to know what do they need to do to get there. And the big question is, if we have a functionalization like was just talked about for NCC with an amide, and then we do a carboxy functionalization, or all these, do we each of those times need to do a whole risk assessment? I mean, that's a very, very expensive process. And how can we figure out a way to reduce that regulatory complexity such that we can get our products to market with a reasonable amount of safety, but with a reasonable amount of progress as well. And so we all know that there's a tremendous number of products. Nano silver products, for example, are about 50% of those products that are out in the market. There is a large number of personal products that come out So these products are already getting out into market, and so there are reasons to believe that most of them are probably not going to have much adverse effects. Some of them will, some of them won't. The question is trying to figure out. We have certain ones, things like nano copper as a facial spray, which my background is in metal toxicity in animals, and so using some of these metals as large inputs into the environment is probably going to fail when it comes to environmental assessments. And so it's something that you should be very cognizant of in terms of your dosage and your specific amounts. The promise of nanotechnology is, of course, pretty great. This was stated quite early that we know these novel properties exist for material science. Once you get to that nanoscale, we get things like quantum confinement. We start to see new properties, and that's what we're going after, as we well know. And this new properties might or have been demonstrated, certainly in some studies, to cause certainly differential effects. And so it always brings me back, harkens me back to the old ad by BASF when they say we don't make things, we make things better. This is essentially what we expect of nanotechnology. And one of those issues that we have with every new technology, we've heard it with DNA technologies, we've heard it with GMOs, is that there's always groups that are fighting back, and the anti-technology groups that exist out there, and they have a right to be heard, but we have to make sure that we counter them with good quality science so that we end up with appropriate regulations. We don't end up with regulations like occurred in Europe in the 90s with genetically modified organisms, and that fiasco. I think that no one's ever been demonstrated to be sick because of a genetically modified organism in food. Nevertheless, there was a pretty large market loss and a fairly large problem that occurred as a result of that. And so we know that governments all over the world have invested in these nanotechnologies at a fairly rapid rate, and we're getting lots of nano products coming out there. I even have a couple myself that are in product development. So we have these large number of emerging nano products. Once we take the time to actually generate the EHS, which can be a tremendously long time, then the regulators get a hold of them, and they can take years to look at them, look at the data, and if they don't know what's going on, they're not going to make any decision. And so you end up with this huge gap. And this huge gap causes delays in getting your product to market, delays in getting your product out there. And as a result, you can lose your competitive edge. You can also, some of these products only have shorter life cycles, only a couple of years before you develop new technologies with a new functionalization. Does it need a new risk assessment? These are all significant issues. And so how do we overcome that? Well, NRC, NSERC, and Environment Canada put together a fairly large amount of money a number of years ago to fund a fairly large network in Canada, which I'm a scientific co-leader of, with Jeff Sonahara at the BRI from the Biotechnology Research Institute in Montreal. We are working on those carboxy-functionalized NCCs and carbon nanotubes. We are working on a variety of different materials. Some of these people who are making materials for us, people like Vive Nano. Vive Nano is a agriculture, well, its primary market for its project is an agricultural broad-scale, new application for broad-scale agriculture as a systemic herbicide and as a mechanism for reducing pesticide use. We have people at SIMS and U of A. Robert Burrell may be familiar with you, for many of you who someone works on nanocrystalline silver. And so we test a variety of different materials under different functionalizations to give a science-based estimate of what really is happening and to be able to distinguish nano effects from free metal effects. We have these particular capabilities. And so we've engaged a large number of people to look at behavior and detection, so how we detect them is a big problem. The biological testings, are those tests appropriate? And we also engage people to look at the legal and regulatory aspects. So I can't speak to each and every one of these, but certainly within our network we can help out industry to be able to get to that point. And we have fairly good scientific advisory panel. So the principal channels are maintaining that public trust. It's absolutely imperative that we maintain it. We need to be proactive and demonstrate products are safer, greener technologies. And that doesn't mean just that it's safer, but we also have to demonstrate why it's greener. Is it a reduced use of energy? Is it a reduced, let the people make the decision about what is important, and those values need to come out. We need to work in advance to prevent and mitigate risks. Something's going to happen eventually. In fact, there have been some suggestions that they have already happened. And so we have to work in advance, and that means a good strategy. And I think the Government of Canada and the university is working on those strategies. And so one of the things that you can do is you can engage the industry with academic researchers at early stage to make sure that you don't expend a lot of money before you get to the end product and do regulatory testing and find out that it fails. I think that's an important, and I always put the word safer because there's no such thing as safe in anything. It's always safer. Right? And expect that something will go wrong, that public trust is not unconditional, but we will assume that we can have a strong impact on that. And the effective guidance to navigate the legal and regulatory environment is absolutely necessary, I think, to support that growth in industry. Now, for those of you who read the literature or are anywhere familiar with environmental applications of nanomaterials, there are over 6,000 papers published last year just on nanotoxicology. It's a huge burgeoning field. Most of it is wrong, right? And I'll tell you why. When you look at the papers that come out, this is a paper coming out in the same week, about a year and a half ago. One says the uptake is passive through this mechanism. Another one says it's active through this mechanism. Same material. Another, same journal, right? Same issue, almost back-to-back papers, right? One says they're non-toxic, and one says they're highly toxic. What the heck is going on? And how do you expect regulators to figure out what's going on if they have no idea? And people are publishing, obviously, discrepant literature, the same levels, everything's the same, the exact same materials, and they get discrepant results. And the reason is, and we figured out through our network, and we're in the middle of a major publication coming through right now, is that most of the assays that are used are absolutely cannot be used because the material itself binds to the active component of the assay and gives you a false reading. Significant problem. And so a lot of that research, when we go through it, 93% of all those papers did not have the appropriate controls to test for that. And so we're going back and trying to do some of this. But we can see that some of the assays, in fact, MTT-MTS assay is one that significantly gives a false up reading, so it's something that you should be considering. And so this creates a lot of uncertainty, and it creates a lot of stress in the people. And we have to start doing a better job in getting that research out to market. And I'll be giving I give these talks at a few different major nanotox conferences. Now, in terms of the regulatory environment, it's really complex. The regulatory environment, if you want to get a product to market that's a point source application for environmental cleanup, it might cost you a few $1 million. If you want to get a pesticide, you're talking $15 to $20 million. If you want to get a health-related material, you're talking $50 to $100 million. A large amount of money. And if you're an SME, you don't have that capital. Right? So regulating it, you don't want to get all the way to the end stage and find out that it's not going to pass. So engage whether they're companies or engage researchers in that product development, and it can help you remove some of those risks. So some of the acts that you'll have to navigate through are things like Environmental Protection Act, SEPA. I think everybody's fairly familiar with it. And within that, there's a new substances division within Environment Canada and a declaration called Section 71, which is right now voluntary to say that you're working on nanomaterials at over a kilogram in production. They're talking about making it mandatory because they have had such little uptake. And so chances are, in not too distant future, around the world, you will have to have a notification that you're at least working on these materials, as long as you're going to produce over a kilogram. I don't work particularly on medical devices. Medical devices, my expertise is in environmental aspects. But we have Fisheries Act, Agricultural Products Pest Control, Fertilizer Acts, a lot of Health Canada Acts. And so if you're going to regulate through this, it's going to take a significant amount of work. So there's product registration is complex because we don't know about these absorption, digestion, metabolism, and excretion, i.e. how those materials work through animals and bodies, including humans and animals, right? Uncertainty of those toxicity effects and the methods for evaluation is important. Right? And because we have this complex regulatory landscape, we have a changing regulatory environment, and I think industry wants to know a set environment. So we have to control plans. What are the things that I'm doing? Actually, I thought I would highlight one of the aspects that I'm working on. Because I'm an academic lab, I'm transferring some of that knowledge out to a particular company through a NanoWorks program funded by AITF. As well, doing testing guidelines. And I work with a company called Hydra Command in Calgary. And what we're doing is developing things like guidance documents so that they can navigate through that regulatory environment. We're also making and developing more higher throughput tests and appropriate tests with the appropriate controls to know that we actually know what's going on. Any testing company can just run a series of tests for you, but they can't give you good data. That's a big problem. And so we're trying to get the word out there, how to do it. My best effort is to actually put people into the industry, and that's part of what I do. My students and my postdocs are going into the industry, and we're also working on developing new detection technologies. Right? And so I don't have any financial interest in Hydra Command, but I do work with them, and I have people that I've trained gone into that. And so we have things like hazard risk assessments on new products, and they can provide some of these things. And we provide that guidance document. So that's an internal document to help industry. So AITF is responsible for providing that support industry, or trying to get that support industry so that Alberta and Prairie and worldwide we'd be able to provide that environment. And so there are huge benefits to Alberta for doing this. I think, this is my last slide. So we get an establishment of a strong network and communication pathway between academic industry and the regulatory agencies. I work with Environment Canada very closely, and I have at least 7 or 8 different industrial partners that I work with right now. We are attracting capital into Alberta for testing and consulting services, and ideally, any of those people that I train, I want to train them into Alberta, and this is one of the goals of AITF, I think, to be able to provide that services infrastructure and raise Alberta's profile as an industry leader. So I welcome your discussions. At coffee break, you can come and talk to me, or at lunchtime, and we can discuss what I can do for you and help lead you to an appropriate direction. So thank you very much.